Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now, very happy to bring in Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times. Gerry, great to have you on. How's things?
Good, thanks, Joe. Yourself?
Yeah, very well. Matt Williams, I felt I couldn't go more than 8 days without speaking to you, so you're very, very welcome. Hello.
You're pining for me, Joe. Yeah.
So, okay, let me throw something at you I had not even planned to touch on. I just saw it 5 minutes ago on Twitter, and I thought, well, Thornley and Williams might have some opinion on this. Danny Kerr and Sam Warburton on their BBC podcast, they were asked to rank the six Nation stadiums. And here's what they've come up with. Number 6 in last place, Stadio Olimpico. So we had Warburton saying, it's not city centre, stadium quite far away, and also if the games were more competitive, that would help. And Danny Kerr agreed. Great trip, but the games aren't the greatest, and that does come into it. At number 5, the second worst stadium in the Six Nations, the Aviva Stadium, is where we are. So Danny Kerr says, Irish fans are going to hate me even more now. Sam Warburton says, it's a beautiful, lovely stadium, amazing atmosphere, but it's still in its infancy as a ground. Danny Kerr says, it's a three-quarters stadium. That bit at the end, I understand the planning issues, but imagine how much better it would be if it was full. I mean, I'm feeling defensive right now, but it's hard to argue with that point a little bit, isn't it? And Warburton says, it is a bit funny, that bit, though he does say if Croke Park was their ground for the last 20 years, it'd be a completely different conversation. Danny Kerr says it'd probably be number 1. Number 4, they had Stade de France. They docked marks for the poor location. Number 3, they had Murrayfield. Number 2, they had Twickenham. And they both said the Principality just ticked all the boxes. Proximity to city centre, size, atmosphere, the roof when it's closed. And they kind of said that was the one. Principality, the clear winner. So, Gerry Thornley, you've been to them all in various capacities, I'm sure. Are we feeling that's about right?
Whoa, nice, easy one to start off with then. Yeah, I think Wales is definitely number 1. I think Cardiff is number 1. Great location, bang the centre, always great atmosphere. Hard to dispute that. I agree about Stade de France being the location not being the best. Not sure Twickenham's a great location either, and London's pretty lost in a big city like London. You go a couple of miles away from Twickenham on a big Six Nations match or even a World Cup match, and there's no great sense that there's a tournament going on. You know what I mean? Once you get out Twickenham and its surrounds, maybe Richmond. I was thinking about this recently, Joe, and I do have to confess that I thought the Aviva Stadium atmosphere for the Wales game was pretty poor. The Murrayfield crowd seemed much more engaged, judging by the TV, but admittedly that was against England and it was a much closer, more competitive match. Stadio Olimpico, yeah, probably last place. In mitigation of Stadio Olimpico, I think the Italians are currently operating on a 50% capacity. They certainly were for round 1. I think that's pretty much the same. You look at all the Serie A games, I watched a bit of Serie A. They all seem to be half empty, stroke half full, whatever way you want to fill your glass. But yeah, I do think that the Aviva Stadium could have lively up itself a little bit more for the Welsh game. But I think, if you go back to last November, it was cracking for the All Blacks match, wasn't it? Yeah. Fortunately, Sunday afternoon against Italy probably won't be the most atmospheric occasion of the Six Nations. But then hopefully, come the final Saturday, Ireland might be going for a title against Scotland. And I think that'll be the first time since 1985 that might even be on the agenda, winning a title on home soil. I think that would see a different atmosphere that day. So we pick and choose our games as a crowd, Gerry. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah, a little bit. I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm probably not going to be favoured amongst a lot of people for saying this, but I didn't think the atmosphere at the Aviva for the opening game against Wales was that great. I have been thinking about this, and certainly when you went to Paris last Saturday, it was chalk and cheese. It was just electric, the atmosphere. The crowd were just far more engaged from well before kickoff, the anthems and everything, and all the way through the match. And there was a real umbilical cord link with the home team in their moments of need. The crowd rallied them and so forth. And but I'm sure if that game had been on Saturday evening in Dublin, it would have been a cracking atmosphere too. Yes, that's the thing. And it's not like the Stade de France was absolutely rocking for the Italians the weekend before. So I guess there's a degree of human nature. Matt, do you care to upset the order there? Stadio Olimpico 6, Aviva 5, Stade de France 4, Murrayfield 3, Twickenham 2, Principality clear winner.
I guess I never really thought about it, to be honest with you, Joe, because I mean Murrayfield's got a running track down the 8-lane 100-metre running track just directly out in front of where the players run out, where the change rooms are. And the madness of that planning, who put that in when they were fixing it up for the 99 World Cup, they're probably still sitting on the committee, but they should be kicked off it. It's never been used as far as I know. But as they covered it up with grass the last time. I agree with Gerry. Twickenham is a long, long way out. Triggers it's a pretty difficult place to go, as is Stade de France, because it's out to Saint-Denis, and it's a long train ride from Gare du Nord out. But you got to say, Cardiff, with all its history, right in the city centre. And, I think Danny Kerr and Sam might have shot themselves in the foot saying the Aviva is in its infancy because the Millennium Stadium was knocked down. I think it's on its third reincarnation. When I was a boy, there used to be a dog track around it in the old days, but it still had a great atmosphere. And I think some of us would remember the old Lansdowne Road was the best ground in the world. That's the problem. It was the best place in the world to play a game.
Was it though? Are we just? Is this rose tinted, green tinted glasses nonsense? No. No,
because the crowd were right on top of you. The terraces at the end, with thousands of people in it. They were the stadium was so old. It was wonderful because people were just on top of the players. I went there as an away. First time I went there was obviously I was an away team. I wasn't part of the home. And then I went there as an away when I coached Scotland as well. So I've had it from both sides at the old stadium. And that, without doubt, for atmosphere, was the best. And Gerry's right. The Irish people do pick and choose their games for atmosphere. But when it's a big day, wow, that place was, the hair on the back of your neck would stand up. And that was equal to Cardiff. But that's changed. I do believe that has changed, and it's not as wonderful all the time as it used to be. But I don't really buy into this ranking, 1 to 6 and all that sort of stuff. It just depends on the day and what the game is. Stade de France, and right now, what Gerry's saying is right. The French people have bought into this team. They believe the World Cup in 2023, it's going to be theirs. They've got a shot at it. This team are playing the type of rugby that France have always prided themselves on. And a decade of darkness, this group and all these young guys. So there is that link. And I think when you've just got to look at Scotland at home, the people thought that this team could do it. And they bought into the Scottish side at home. Now, Scotland went away and let them down, as they have done so often in the past, but different state. And you come to Sydney, I'll tell you the same thing. The Olympic Stadium has the atmosphere of an outside toilet. I won't go there anymore because you're so far away from the people. You go to the old Sydney Football Stadium, mate, that place was just gorgeous for a game of rugby. I adored it. Now they pulled it down and they're in the process of building another one. So each stadium has its own unique character, and that can change with the changes of the stadium. So I do agree a little bit with the boys. Yeah. But I don't agree that one stadium's better than the other. It just depends on the occasion.
Yes, I think you're right.
Could I just say one more thing about that, Joe?
Please,
so much, Matt's right, so much of this is dependent on results, the sense of occasion, the quality of the matches and so forth. Like, Wales always seem to get their fifth match when they're going for a Grand Slam or a title in Cardiff. That helps. Like the last 4 times Ireland have won a Grand Slam or a Six Nations title, there's been Cardiff, Paris, Twickenham and Murrayfield. Not one of them at home. Of all 4 of those games have been played in Dublin, and Ireland were seeding Grand Slams and titles in the Aviva Stadium, we'd have a different view of the ground.
Yeah, fair point. Anyway, look, I think on the ranking point, I agree with you, Matt. It's the internet. It's in my bones now. I feel like we have to rank everything. It's just the way of the world. It is the most gap week conversation I think I've ever had. So we'll press on, because I did really want to get your thoughts on what's happening here with the Six Nations, because I'm sure you're seeing through the spin and the various reporting and you'd have a good feel for things. So the South Africa and the Six Nations story really kicked off again on Wednesday last week when the Daily Mail had an exclusive. It was Chris Foy on the Wednesday, and he was reporting that South Africa switched. The Six Nations is still very much on. Talks continuing about the Springboks joining Europe's Showpiece tournament from 2025. Initially, it was thought to be 2024 to get a full World Cup cycle, but due to complexities, it's going to be 12 months later. Well-placed sources, their report said, have suggested the most likely plan is for the 6-team format to be retained rather than any expansion of the championship, and CVC very much the driving force here. Subsequent to that report, the Six Nations Committee came out on Friday and shot that down. They said they would be neither adding nor subtracting to the roster, and South Africa have signed up to the Rugby Championship until 2025. So this, Gerry, just isn't really going away, and obviously we've seen the clubs link up with European rugby, and that's going to continue apace. So where are we on this, do you think?
I think it's a non-runner myself. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, South Africans sent a letter to the Six Nations saying they would be interested in exploring the possibility of joining the Six Nations one day. It wasn't even by 2025, it was further down the track. And the Six Nations wrote back to them saying, well, we're really, all that we're really interested in at the moment is getting this biennial Nations League off the ground. You know, there's 12-team international competition to give more meaning to the July series and the November series, with a final at the end of the year to declare a world number one side at the end of that year. And there's been no dialogue whatsoever, is my understanding, about South Africa joining the Six Nations. I don't believe it'll happen. I don't believe there's any willingness or desire to kick Italy out. No doubt we'll talk about Italy's competitiveness in due course in this show, but my understanding is it's not desired, it's not wanted, it's not going to happen. It would upset the whole equilibrium of the game. It would actually throw a complete spanner in the works for a biennial tournament if South Africa were suddenly playing in the Six Nations instead of Italy. It goes against all the global certainties of the game, the different hemispheres. The Six Nations is a European tournament. One of the great attractions is that even with Italy, whatever you think of Stadio Olimpico, when it's full or not, it's accessible. Every ground is within 2 hours of everybody else's ground by air. That wouldn't be the case if South Africa entered the tournament. And one of the great features of the Six Nations is this big mix of both home and away fans. It's like no other tournament in the world for that, bar World Cups. On an annual basis, nothing like it. So as far as I'm concerned, that's my sources. This is not going to happen.
Yes. Matt, do you want to come in on that point from Gerry? The essence of the tournament would be diluted very much so if South Africa arrived in.
If you look at the history of the tournament, like it goes back the 1870s in Edinburgh. It was the first game, England versus Scotland. And then it was, the four, I hate to use the word, but that's what it was called, the home nations that they used. France came in before the First World War. They've been kicked out a few times for horror of horrors, paying money to players. Can't believe it. But we had to wait till 1967 for France to come through with a Grand Slam. So, there's a considerable period of time from pre-World War I to 1967. So there was a time when France were regarded as basket cases. Now, you can't possibly believe that now. So I agree with Gerry. Everything about this tournament that makes it beautiful and unique is that officials haven't buggered it up by changing it. Mm. Now, some of that's I'd like to say all of that is great planning, but some of it was ineptitude. They couldn't make a decision. And some of it was bigotry in the old amateur days where the private school boys or the public school boys from England were looking down their nose at everyone else across the globe. Can't believe that either, can you? But the essence of it is what Gerry says. It's a European game, and it's annual. It's every year it comes around. There's no other competition at this time of year. There's no other great sporting tournament. The Australian Open in tennis finishes just before it starts. There's really no other major sporting competition around the world in that window. So they don't want to make it longer. They want to keep it there. But if they bring Africa in, you have got the law of unintended consequences just banging on the door. What will happen? Super Rugby is being decimated by ridiculous decision-making by officials. And some of it, they probably felt they were doing the right thing. There's been Japan, there's been all these other ones. They split it into conferences. None of it has worked. And the South Africans have been the malcontents in that competition. Now, if you actually start boiling it down, what does South Africa bring? There is not 20 million rugby supporters in South Africa. The numbers at the South African provincial games have dropped dramatically. The rand, their currency, is very low in value. So the only upside is for the Africans to get hold of some euros. So there's lots of upsides financially for the South Africans to come in. There's not a lot of ups for Europe, especially the fact that South Africa can come in and dominate the competition. And there's a strong chance that they would. It also brings in travel factors. It brings in all these other things. And we lose Rome. And I can tell you, Rome is the most popular away venue as far as numbers go, because everyone can take their wives and family or their wives to Rome because they love going to Rome. It's a great place. So even though the sporting numbers are very poor for the Italian rugby team, the support of the supporters travelling there is very positive. And then there's the other talk of Georgia and all this other stuff. Like, forget it. Just don't even look at bringing them in. Their basket cases, how they're running their rugby there, their governance is quite frightening in a lot of these Eastern European countries. And I don't want to say too much more about it, but it is frightening. So, I agree with Gerry. I think this is there is concern, obviously, for the national team because they're playing so poorly for so long. But I don't believe anything will change. And I certainly hope it doesn't.
Gerry, the CVC seem to be the driving force here and have accelerated this conversation around South Africa joining the Six Nations. What's in it for them? What are they seeing here in terms of the finances? Why does South Africa arriving and, say, for instance, Italy departing, we get more competitive games? Maybe there's the danger, as Matt says, of South Africa dominating. But financially, South Africa in the tournament, how does that make CVC more money, do we think?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, Joe. I haven't looked at it from the CVC point of view because my understanding, again, is this is not a CVC decision. This will be a decision made exclusively, if there ever was going to be a decision like this, by the Six Nations. Nobody else would have to be agreed by the six countries. It wouldn't be a CVC decision. They do not have a 50% plus controlling interest in the Six Nations or anything like it. They're a shareholder that will want more bang for their buck, for sure. And I presume they think with South African TV money maybe coming in instead of Italian TV money and maybe other sponsorships as well, that maybe there'll be more money generated in that way. But again, like I said, I don't think this is going to be a CVC decision. Okay.
And am I right in saying, because I read it over the week, these are not things I've had to really care about or consider before, but any decision made doesn't require a 6-0 vote. A 5-1 majority decision would be required for big changes like this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's my understanding as well. And again, there's been no even exploratory talks about this. There's no desire or want to get rid of the Italians from this tournament. It doesn't exist. It would make the elite of the game even more of a closed shop than ever before, and it would make 23 years of investment in Italian rugby just shredded. You just shred it, just flush it down the toilet. Whereas, if anything, having spent this amount of time invested this amount of time in Italian rugby, it should be persisted with and try to help them even more. And like, I presume we are going to come on and talk about it.
Yeah.
And I know Matt's feelings about this, but like, their under 20 and under 18 results in the last 3 years have never been better. It's small shoots of recovery, but it makes no sense to cut them adrift now.
So let's talk Italy then. 34-0 is the headline. They haven't won a match since 2015. I mean, you don't have to go into ancient history to a period where it really wasn't so bad and there was at least the possibility of an Italian win, which is kind of all you need, I think. It's okay if they don't win many games, but if there's a degree of jeopardy or the potential for a shock, then that keeps people interested. So you go back to 2015, that was their last win. They had one win in that championship. In 2013, as we well know, they had 2 wins. They had a win in 2012, they had a win in 11, they had a win in 10, they had a win in 08, and they had 2 wins in 2007. So that was a pretty good decade from 06, where they had a win as well, through to 15. That was very, very acceptable, where they had 2 wins on 2 occasions. And now they've hit this famine, and they've never had one like this since they joined in 2000. Perhaps the point to jump off on, Matt, is what Gerry talked about, the under-20s doing very, very well. So Brendan Fanning was reporting on this, and I know you've a similar sense of the Italian system from chatting to you off air. 2016, Stephen Aboud arrives from the IRFU. Conor O'Shea is in. Aboud has huge respect in the game. He put in place an academy system. There was green shoots, as we've discussed, and then a new president has arrived and seems to have scrapped the academy system, and the clubs are getting control of the players again. Brendan Fanning yesterday described this move as the equivalent of burning the house down to keep your mates in the local fire station in a job. The mates in the clubs who voted you into power. So, I mean, is that your sense, that this academy system was in place and was the way to go, and now clubs get a certain president in and they're almost shooting themselves in the foot here? Is that actually what Italian rugby is on the cusp of doing?
It appears to be, Joe. Yeah, I hate to confirm that, but it does appear to be, from the outside and what we're hearing, that's exactly as you describe it, what's happened. They put this great structure in place. They've got really good results with their 18s and 20s. Their 20s last year, when it was in Cardiff, lost, I think it was 3 games by less than 2 points. 2 of them, France and England, and I believe their goal-kicking percentages in those games were just above 50%. So they dominated the games and still didn't win. But at 20s level, you do obviously want to win. That's not accurate to say you don't want to win, but you want to develop. It's a development process, and seeing their teams develop should be great. But what seems to have occurred is that the clubs that are very, and if you know the level below Benetton and the Zebra is clubs, and it'd be like going into the AIL, but not even at the quality of that standard. And these clubs are complaining they're losing players to academies, and they're not losing them, they're just lost control of them. So they're getting better coaching at these academies and learning, and they're coming into the 18s and 20 systems and really improving. Then obviously they go back to the clubs. But it's such short-mindedness from the clubs that they've elected a president from their own ranks who seems to be, I have to say, I'm not in the system, but Brendan Fanning's there, and I've certainly got a number of people telling me within the system that is what is occurring, that they're going to break down this structure that has been put in, that has provided success and is pumping kids through, good quality players through, and that is going to be pulled apart. Now, the only other place that I know that was as stupid as that is my home country, that managed to dismantle the system that won 2 World Cups and got them to a third that they didn't win in 2003, and then managed to pull that whole system apart. And look where Australian rugby is. They've gone from world champions 3 times twice in a decade, and a final in another. Two finals, they just pull the whole system apart. But unfortunately, that is what I am hearing, Joe. And it is, nothing in sport is a tragedy, but if there's anything that could be a rugby tragedy, that is it, loading a gun, pointing at your own toe and pulling the trigger.
Gerry?
Yeah, it seems nonsensical, doesn't it? It seems they just seem to have an awful lot of internal political problems in their elections. Like it seems to be a bad advert for democracy, and there's no doubt that you don't come to a point where you've lost 34 games in a row and abandon your academy system and things like this, unless there's bad mismanagement at the very top in Italian rugby. And Italy's now been in the Six Nations for 23 years, and that's a lot of Six Nations money that's come into the game, and they've only 2 professional teams to run. They clearly should be making a far better fist of the professional game than they are currently doing.
So how much of an Achilles heel do you feel it is for the tournament, Gerry? You ask most punters, and I would think generally the only Italian match they might watch is the one that their home country are playing in. So for Irish fans, it will be on Sunday. Really, we have 2 games per weekend, and the Italians at the moment is how it feels. How damaging is that, or are there just certain realities that, this is sport, and look at the Premier League, there's a dominant team or 2, and then there's a couple at the bottom who are nowhere near the races. That's just the reality, and let's count our blessings. We have 5 teams where anyone can beat anyone.
Well, there's that too, but if you say that the weakest link of a tournament is so far off the pace, then it's clearly bad for the tournament. You have a situation where pretty much every team is not only now expected to beat Italy, but there's something amiss if you don't get a bonus point as well. And in fact, you could have the title coming down ultimately 2 points difference. and it could be effectively decided by which team runs up the biggest score on the Italians, and that's clearly not good for the tournament. Doesn't help when they're shoehorned in on a Sunday afternoon, as is happening for the third weekend in a row. And then you've got a game like that England game, that Italy-England game in round 2, which on the Sunday, which was just a very poor advertisement for the tournament, wasn't it? So it's not a good look for the tournament. It's not a healthy. It's not good for the tournament that it could come down to whoever beats Italy the most, and that conceivably could be the case.
Yeah, Matt, for you, how big an issue is it for the tournament at the moment?
Oh, it's massive for me. It's massive for all the points you just brought out, Joe. But and again, this is constant short-termism from the leadership in Italian rugby. You know, they've had Nick Mallett in there that got some good wins, started putting things in place. Connor O'Shea came in as a director of rugby. He was the head coach, but he was director of rugby, and set up all these systems. And they then when Connor leaves, they demolish them. They're able to coach him for a year, bring someone else in. They've got no concept of building for the future, of long-term development. Now, and the quality of the education that they're giving their young players. So, you know, Japan and America, the USA, they've got more teams than almost every other country in the world, much more than Ireland. But it's the quality of the education as rugby players they get as they come through that produces the good players. And the Italians just keep saying it's a coach problem. It's a coach problem. And it is not a coach problem. This is not Kieran Crowley's problem. This is a problem that needs to be addressed by Stephen Aboud and all the people in that academy, and they are. So in 5 years' time, they'll have some good players. Well, not even 5 years, 2 or 3 years. Look at Leinster. Look at Ireland. These players are being produced. They're getting good education at 15, 16, 14, 15, 16 on the way through, and then they're going into good academies, good clubs, and we're producing really high-quality Irish teams with a very small base because we've got good educators. And that's not happening in Italy. And all the things that Gerry just said, where you're going, well, unless you get a 50 points and a bonus point win against Italy, you fail. I mean, that's obviously not good for any competition. It's not good for Italy. It's not good for the teams playing them. We only had to watch that game the other day, England versus Italy, and it was awful. You know, it was an awful day for both sides. And you don't want to – Six Nations is such quality. You don't want to come out of any of those games and say it's an awful day. It's got to be for Wales the day before, it was an uplifting event. You know, it was disappointing for Scotland, but it was a close match. And that's what you need right now, 50-0. And it's not 50-0 New Zealand will do it to you. It's 50-0 because of complete incompetence from your opposition.
Yeah. Gerry, I think you could be right, by the way, in the scheduling. Having Italy as the standalone fixture on a Sunday doesn't work. I mean, give us one bumper game on a Saturday, bumper game on a Sunday, and sure, we can keep half an eye on the Italian game on the Saturday. Two bumper matches in one day is too much for any mere mortal with a life. It's almost when it's the centrepiece on a Sunday, like the England game most recently, it feels like such a letdown.
Yeah, completely. I don't understand the schedule. It seems almost deliberate to shoehorn Italy off into the Sunday's afternoon slot, which makes it even less of a appealing game than it already is, because it's so predictably, the outcome. You look at the Paddy Power odds or whoever odds, and it's going to be, I presume Ireland are going to be like -30 or -40 or something this Sunday, and England are probably something similar. I think they actually came up a little short on the handicap. Maybe they just covered it. France actually came up a little short as well. Like, it makes no sense to me to have them. This feast on a Saturday, and then there's relative famine on a Sunday.
Our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. Just before we go, to cast a quick backward glance on the weekend, Ulster beat the Dragons 12 points to 0. Connacht 29-23 winners away to Scarlets. Leinster beat the Ospreys 29 points to 7. On the Friday, Munster were 34 points to 20 winners against Edinburgh. Simon Zebo scored a hat-trick, his 67th Munster try in the bag. James Lowe came off the bench, scored a try for Leinster. Harry Byrne played his first 80 minutes of the season. He was man of the match, although interestingly he played at 12. Ross was at 10. Gerry, I'm sure you were keeping a general eye on the URC over the weekend. What grabbed you, or what's the headline?
I thought the performance of the weekend from the 14 from 4 Irish sides was Connacht away to the Scarlets. Like, they were 10-0 down, and it looked like their season might be running adrift a bit, and even looking dodgy for the top 8, which they need to get. And it definitely pivoted on that moment when Dan Jones goes for a crossfield kick off a penalty when the Scarlets are 10-0 up, when it could have been a line out around about the Connacht 22. The Tom Daly caught it and passed inside to Sammy Arnold, one of the most improved players I've seen in Irish rugby this season, but he's added to his game and he scores a try. I thought Jack Carty was excellent. They worked their way back into the game. I thought they deserved their win. It looked like it might get away from them with an utterly ridiculous red card for Fifita for a second yellow card offence when I don't know what he's meant to do, parachute up into the air to get out of the way of the fellow who kicked the ball. I mean, just a ridiculous red card. And you thought, oh no, it's going to turn against them again. I thought that was a fabulous win for them in their season. It really keeps them alive. They needed that win badly, and I thought it was the standout win of the 4.
Okay, I mentioned James Lowe back. So a question in on YouTube, Connor's watching. Has Mac Hansen done enough to knock a fit James Lowe down the pecking order if we were picking World Cup 15 tomorrow, Matt Williams?
No. He's been brilliant. Mac Hansen, brilliant. Been a great selection by Andy Farrell. Wonderful play. And the young man's grabbed his opportunity with both hands. Nothing but respect and admiration for him. But he hasn't got the left boot that James Lowe has. And getting out of your territory on that side of the field against great teams and the top 4 teams in the world, New Zealand, South Africa, France, let's put England in there when they get everyone back as well. You need James Lowe's left boot, all things being equal, gets him in the side. I would hope this selection for the game this weekend, we do see some selections like James Lowe getting another game, like and I actually wrote it down here. The what if scenarios. What if Hugo Keenan gets injured? What do we do? Who's the next fullback? And if it's Larry hasn't got a cap. We've got to use this game to bring some people in. And when you consider what Joey Carberry had done for that last game, he'd only had 2 selections against top 10 teams in the world in his caps from 2016 up to that point. I mean, that's really bad. The Italian game is the game where they have to start saying we need to give some people more time. And I would hope that a fit James Lowe, I don't know how he is, I know he's been brought into the squad, he would be someone that needs it because he's only got, I've got it written down here, he's only got 9 caps. If we work on this theory that we want most of the squad to be up around 20 caps, we've got to start blooding and giving some of these other players a serious start. Finlay Bealham, even though he's got 20 caps, he's only started against Italy, USA, Japan. Canada, USA, and Japan, and one of those was a loose head prop. So what happens if Furlong falls over? So there's two parts to that. Mac Hansen has proved himself to be a very capable player. James Lowe needs to get up around 20 caps and move Mac around a little bit as well. But there are a number of glaring positions in the squad where we need to give people starts because there might come a day where they'll need that experience.
Mm. Gerry, who is the Hugo Keenan replacement if he does get injured or fall foul of anything?
Remarkable to think there really isn't one at the moment. Technically speaking, if you look at the squad, it's the uncapped Michael Larry would come in. So I feel mad. I think we've got Irish Rugby, Andy Farrell and the team have to look at some alternatives at fullback in case something were to happen to Hugo Keenan. And I believe maybe Mac Hansen could be played there one day. He has played plenty of fullback. Michael Larry, definitely. You'd love to see Simon Zebo get back in the mix because he can offer so much if he was really flying on top of his game. But as things stand, it's Hugo Keenan or bust really, unless they give Michael Larry a go. They'll do that. Jimmy O'Brien could be a dark horse for 15. Stuart Lancaster certainly thinks that's his best position. But, they need to look at somebody else, and sooner rather than later, because chances for experimentation or risk-taking are few and far between. When you think after this game, it's, go to Twickenham and pick your best team to try and win the game, then win that game, hopefully, and then you've got Scotland home and maybe fighting for a title. So that demands that Ireland put their best team out on the pitch. So the next opportunity for any kind of risk will be against a Super Rugby side or the New Zealand Maori outside of the 3 tests against the All Blacks next summer.
And do you agree on ultimately Hansen hasn't done enough to displace Lowe if they're both fit, Gerry?
I would think that Lowe will come back in because of that left boot. Yeah, as soon as you ask, that's what I was thinking as well. Also, he brings a lot of X factor. If you look at the France-Ireland game, you might say the one thing, I'm not saying Mac Hansen doesn't have X factor, look at his try, but James Lowe, he's such an improved player with the one we saw last November defensively, work rate off the ball, and Ireland makes such good use of that left boot, but he's also got a brilliant offloading game which can, free others as well, and is a fantastic finisher. Like his try rate for Leinster is ridiculous, so I think he probably will come back in.
Okay, very good. Clock is pretty much coming against us. By the way, on the Mac Hansen try, I have gone from when I first watched it going, that was kind of odd, to the more I've watched it thinking, this is one of the greatest tries I have ever seen in the history of rugby. The skill set, the full-on speed. I feel like it should be in the, I don't know, did they do a shortlist for try of the year? I've never seen, have either of you seen a try like that before?
Under 8, it's usually some kid, biggest kid in the side gets the ball and runs through everyone from the kickoff. But if you're dead right, Joe. I'm having a bit of fun there. But if you watch Hansen, from the time the ball comes off Joey Carberry's boot, he's watching it, and he runs between 5 French players, misses them all by centimetres. If one of those guys steps half a metre either way, he just runs at full pace into them. And then he catches the ball. He doesn't catch the ball as it's coming to him. He catches it like a wide receiver on the far side, so the ball crosses his body to get to it. Yeah, it was extraordinary. But the most shocked people on the planet were the 5 French players. They just couldn't believe what he did, But it was a great try. Great try.
Doesn't break stride, Gerry. Like, it's full speed. He's watching that the whole way and probably trying to keep an eye on the 4 or 5 French lads as well. Again, my appreciation for it, I don't think I copped how amazing it was.
No, probably no. I probably didn't either until I watched it back. Now, you watch Damien Penno and Melvin Jamley kind of lead the ball for each other, and I think Jamley was exposed a little bit under the high ball by Ireland. I'm not sure he's their answer. Great goal kicker though he is. So I'm not sure Manson gets away with that every time, but his own execution was outstanding. He's been a brilliant little addition to the squad. He really has. My favourite Mac Hansen moment, apart from the try, was the Gary Ringrose try off the turnover ball against. When Andrew Porter rips the ball out, Keller pops it off the ground, and you see the camera angle from behind, from the wing, and you see Hansen coming in off his wing before the ball even reaches Gibson Park. By the time it gets to Johnny Sexton, he's on his shoulder and calling for the ball. He then straightens through and times the pass perfectly for Bundyaki. Brilliant heads up, turnover, quick thinking rugby, and he's created a 3-on-1 on the outside for Gary Ringrose to finish. Like, he's definitely got something. He's going to, and think of it as well, if he's a goal kicker, he can play 10, he can play wing, he can play full back. That could be a really handy little addition to any 31-man World Cup squad.
Well, is he worth a look at full back? I mean, imagine him getting involved from full back and James Lowe getting involved from the wing and Johnny or Joey at 10. Like, suddenly that's got a lot of options, surely.
Yeah, I think that could be an option.
Sorry, Gerry.
Sorry, up to you, Matt. Go on.
Sorry, mate. I thought Joe was talking about. Mate, yes, it can, but I think we've also got to go back and just take a little bit of caution, remembering what happened when Robbie Henshaw was put a fullback against England.
Yeah.
The fullbacks cover more, and the nines cover ridiculously large amounts of sprinting in a game, like 7-8 kilometres, and the most number of high sprints. So whoever we put there, he's got to have time at his club. You can't just throw him in at international level because they just get caught out. There's too many variables. But can he play fullback? Absolutely. He's played fullback for the Brumbies, and he covers all the bases he could. But there's a number of positions in this team where we do have to look at what happens if Furlong goes, what happens now, if Keenan goes, and so on. There's about 3 or 4 positions that are screaming out, we need to give someone time in a test match.
Okay. Fellas, great chat. Much appreciated. Matt Williams, Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Gerry. Thanks, Joe.
Cheers, guys. And before we go, we do have a competition for you. So Ireland against Italy at the weekend on Sunday. We have a set of 3 tickets to give away for the game at the Aviva Stadium. All with thanks to our rugby partner Vodafone. To get your name in this evening's draw, just identify our mystery voice who was glad that his concert experiences are back to normal after not being a huge fan of all that socially distant business.
if you don't really know where you stand, that creates problems for everybody.
Text rugby, followed by your answer and name to 53106. The prize again, 3 tickets for Ireland-Italy this weekend, all in association with Vodafone #TeamOfUs.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.